So, one of my favorite games of all time is this game called Persona 5. It's a Japanese role playing game or JRPG developed by Atlas. And in this game, you and your ever expanding gang of high school peers don the name the Phantom Thieves. And you use an app to enter an alternate dimension where people's wicked desires take physical form. Their job is to challenge these wicked people and defeat them with their personas, a manifestation of their true inner self, in order to change these enemies for the better in the real world, bettering society and making lifelong friends in the process. The game did very well across the world. In fact, at the Game Awards in 2017, the game was nominated for the show's Game of the Year, Best Art Direction, Best Score/Music, and Best Role-Playing Game. But Persona 5 only won Best Role-Playing Game at the event. The game rocketed itself into my top 5 all-time games ever played when I played it. So when Persona 5 the animation got announced for April of 2018, I was understandably very excited. But this adaptation for Persona 5, it failed to steal my heart. And so I'm gonna lay it all on the table here for you so you know where my biases lie. I love the Persona series, I really do. I am a new fan compared to most, Persona 5 being my first main entry into the list. Before that, the only Persona media I had consumed was Persona 4 the animation, which, while good, I wasn't able to fully comprehend or fully appreciate until I played the game. Which brings me back to Persona 5. The game was such a complete masterpiece in my eyes in all aspects. The art style, characters, voice acting, and especially the music, and I'm not just talking about Persona 5. The music across all Persona games is just so otherworldly, so amazing, that it catapulted me back into the older games where I have been in an unhealthy spiral since. It made me want to finish Persona 4. I up until that point, I had only gotten about halfway through it. I restarted the game and played its completion. I then rewatched Persona 4 the animation, allowing me to realize how good that adaptation was of Persona 4. And I'm currently finishing Persona Q and Persona 3 FES. In the anime adaptation of Persona 5, though, the animation is just often stagnant and plain not there. The art is, I won't say awful, it's just inconsistent. In the keyframes, it looks really, really gorgeous, but often if it's not a keyframe, it looks janky at best. And it may get fixed in the Blu-rays, as they tend to fix some of those things, but the likelihood of them all getting fixed is slim. The characters also feel like shells of their in-game counterparts, and the pacing was absurdly fast, and then it will just suddenly grind to a halt for a confidant-based filler episode to give us forced character development. These faults caused me to constantly compare it to Persona 4 the animation in my head. When you stand the two side by side, Persona 4 the animation has everything that its counterpart Persona 5 the animation does not. AIC, who animated Persona 4 the animation, does a fantastic job of taking the story and creating a pacing that works very well. During the important boss fights, the characters are given focus rather than the fight itself, building up to a wonderful climax where beating the boss can only be accomplished by accepting your true self. This is a wonderful change from Persona 4, where it's just turn-based action until you beat it, and then the character accepts the shadow after the fight is over. This gives the fight in the show a twist by giving it added weight and emotion through character development by making the character accepting itself the weakness of the main boss. This is a type of addition a video game adaptation needs to survive. It also helps that Persona 4 anime's boss fights were often very well animated and not filled with weird CGI bosses, as is the case in Persona 5 the animation, and other anime nowadays, but that's a topic for another day. The pacing wasn't perfect though, sometimes getting through an entire palace in just an episode or two, but that is understandable as no one wants to see the main characters grind in a dungeon to get to the end. I'm actually okay with them skipping to the boss fight most of the time, if they supplement it with good character development, which Persona 4 the animation knew to do. Persona 4 the animation knew when to slow down and shine a light on social links and give us lighthearted moments that weaved into the story well, and where it wouldn't otherwise work with the main plot. For example, in Persona 4 the animation, they took 2 whole episodes during summer vacation where they took a moment to work the side characters' social links and made it work in a way that they tied together since it would not have worked into the main plot naturally. Now, this did cause the story to grind to a halt for those 2 episodes, and I know that was something I complained about, but for this case, I feel like it worked because of the fact that these are side characters that wouldn't work into the main plot and not main characters. And it also, on top of that, it weaved all these side characters' plots together and made it one coherent plot, making it fun, and then they presented it from 2 different characters' perspectives as well, giving it a fun, lighthearted twist. Also, how they made the main character's social links advance naturally in the story, as if to give us the impression it is part of the main story and not something you have to go out of your way to do like in the game. They did this extremely well in my opinion with the main group, Chie, Kanji, Rise, Yukiko, Yosuke, and even to a lesser extent Naoto. And I say to a lesser extent with Naoto just because she was a late addition to the squad, so she doesn't get as much screen time to develop like the other characters did. Persona 5 the animation has none of that though. It will fly through the dungeons to get to the climax where the boss fight is super fast and has no weight because the characters aren't developed, and it looks awful because the bosses are in CG and there's poor key animation and the rushed pace causes you to feel nothing for the characters when the battle is over. It feels hollow and lifeless. The whole show is given this treatment. The confidants are not weaved in smartly. There would be entire episodes where the show came to a halt just to advance a main character's confidant, rather than give us little doses throughout the show, causing the whole link to happen in one sitting. All that forced development does not feel natural, and it cuts down on the characters' interactions as a whole. Persona 4 the animation breaks it up across the series, where you will get a bit of development here and there. When you compare the two, it makes it feel like the Persona 5 the animation production team was just trying to get it out of the way rather than do it right. But my biggest gripe has got to be with the handling of Persona 5's main character, Ren Amamiya, better known as his Phantom Thief name, Joker. They had two choices on how to handle him: give him a personality and try and make him feel like an actual character, or just have him sit there and say his required lines of dialogue. One makes him feel organic and fun, the other makes him feel like a cardboard cutout. I'm gonna let you guess what they did, although, trending on how this talk is going, I'm assuming you know what I'm gonna say. This is again where I think Persona 5 the animation did a phenomenal job handling its protagonist, Yu Narukami. They took this character that's just a self-insert for Yu in the game, and they gave him a hilarious deadpan sense of humor, lines during conversations with his friends, and a range of other emotions where he got angry, happy, sad, the whole gambit. He felt real. There especially are scenes late in the show when it was reaching its climax that surrounded a certain character's death where they really went all in to make him feel sympathetic. They wanted to make him feel alive, despite the fact that he's just an insert for you, the player, in the game. None of that happened with Ren in Persona 5 the animation. He was just a bland cardboard cutout with no personality, with this one exception where I will give them credit.
暴いてやる。何やってんだよ。つい。
Most of the time, he was just there though, not actually saying or doing anything, which is fine in the game because you are him, but not in the anime where he's supposed to be his own character. He's supposed to be Ren Amamiya. Even in the game, he had a slightly cocky personality based on dialogue options and conversations with the confidants, but not even that showed through. But I will say this, I did get some enjoyment on the little scenes they did add, such as attempting to build the relationship between Akechi and Ren, to make the climax of Akechi's story have a little bit more impact, because if I'm being honest, I felt almost nothing for Akechi in the game, especially not sympathy. There are also these flashback scenes of many of the characters as children that helped highlight their admiration they once had for these foes they now faced. But those were just veiled attempts to give us extra character development and make us feel empathetic with the characters, since that hadn't been handled properly with the characters. Persona 5 the animation as a whole feels incredibly lazy and emotionless. Yes, it does tell the story of Persona 5, but it doesn't allow you to feel connected to the story like the game does, and how Persona 4 the animation does in its adaptation of its game. I think the main problem here is that honestly, Persona 5 the animation is just not necessary to have. The game itself is the greatest version of its story we are ever going to have. Persona 4 came out on the PlayStation 2 in standard definition on 2008, while Persona 4 the animation came out in 2011. There was plenty to gain from making a high-definition anime adaptation, by giving the show and characters life that the technical limits of the PlayStation 2 couldn't handle. But this is just not the case with where video game technology is at now. Persona 5 came out on the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, and console hardware has just advanced past the need for an adaptation. When you play Persona 5, you are put in this game with a stunningly beautiful art style and aesthetic, and an amazing soundtrack that rivals games like Nier Automata and Red Dead Redemption. The story and characters may not be perfect and may stumble at times in regards to pacing and development, but it still sucked me into their world and the story that I felt legitimately sad when the credits rolled and the game ended. Because it felt as if I was leaving those friends behind. Friends that you went through entire arcs with, people you got to know. Not to mention how they managed to make turn-based RPGs fun. With its fluid combat sound and visuals, it was just a feast for the eyes with the all-out attacks and the baton passes and the critical hits. It was amazing. They even had their own gorgeously animated in-game cutscenes animated by Production IG, and when you stand them up side by side with Cloverworks Persona 5, the anime doesn't stand a chance. I mean, it's been beaten to death, but look at how the all-out attacks look in the game compared to the show. The game just gives us everything so well that the anime was set up to fail. There's nothing to gain from a Persona 5 anime besides Atlus just cashing in on their star franchise Persona, which, let's be honest, I think that's all it really is, and I can't blame them for it, as Persona is currently at its peak in popularity. Atlus milked Persona 3 and 4 for a decade before it was ready to move on. After the two main editions of Persona 3 and Persona 4, we got enhanced editions in Persona 3 FES, Persona 3 Portable, and Persona 4 The Golden. Then we got fighting games in Persona 4 Arena and Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, and a freaking rhythm game that, mind you, is technically canon in Persona 4 Dancing All Night, and 3 anime adaptations, with 4 Persona 3 movies to tell that game's story, and 2 Persona 4 anime, making Persona 4 the animation and the enhanced edition into an anime called Persona 4 the Golden Animation. There's also manga and a 3DS crossover game that I mentioned prior called Persona Q. I think it's safe to say the main reason the anime ended up existing was because of money. But you don't really need me to tell you that to figure that out, it's pretty obvious. So after the massive success of Persona 5, it makes sense that they would do the same here. In fact, I would bet much of Persona's milking was in the works before the game dropped, as 2 more Persona rhythm games have dropped since the release of Persona 5, and Persona Q2 is set to come out in July of 2019, and an enhanced edition of Persona 5 called Persona 5 The Royal getting teased just this March. So not only was it doomed to fail from the aspect that the show itself had already set the bar incredibly high, I wouldn't be surprised if the show was rushed out because they wanted to cash in on its popularity, causing the timetable for the production to be incredibly crunched. The anime is produced by Cloverworks, which is a branch studio of A1 Pictures, but I think we are all smart enough to know at this point that studios themselves don't matter that much, as any studio is capable of giving you quality or garbage. It is all about who those studios contract to do the job and the timetable they are given to create the work. Cloverworks has put out 8 anime so far since being rebranded by A1, and the resume is pretty good, with a few very popular shows being released by them already. Fall 2018's Rascal anime, Winter 2019's Promised Neverland, and the hit show with the super lame ending, 2018's Darling in the Franxx. So I think it's safe to say that you can't just go the lazy route and blame Cloverworks. The talent hired to produce is also talented folk as well, as it is almost always the case. The director Masahi Ishihama worked on hundreds of anime before, but only directed twice prior. But he directed From the New World, or Shinsekai Yori if that's how you know it as, which was a critically acclaimed series, albeit one that had its own animation and pacing issues at time, but a great show nonetheless. I could keep going down the list of workers and their list their experience, but I think on very rare occasions it's the talent's fault. This is a budgeting and deadline issue. Workers were likely, and I say likely as I have no proof and this is speculation, overworked and underpaid, because this is the problem in the anime industry. It's a long topic and I don't really want to go into it, so I'll be brief. They were probably given an unrealistic deadline to finish their work, and which resulted in half-assed story structure, plagued with lackluster art, animation, and pacing. In a report from Kotaku on February 26, 2019, it stated animators got 5 whole days off a month while working close to 10 hours a day, and their salary topped off at $48,000 while new animators only made $14,000. It's suffice to say they aren't working in the best conditions. I'll link that in the description for you guys if you want to take a look at that article by Kotaku. It's really insightful. But what I'm trying to say here is that while I bag on the product we were given with the show, I know better than to blame the animation studio and the staff. When I feel it's more the fault of the talent not getting enough time to do the work. I mean, we have seen what these talented people can do when given the means to do so. Shows like Mob Psycho 100, the first season of One Punch Man, Attack on Titan, and pretty much anything by Kyoto Animation looks gorgeous, and the list can go on. So, in the end, I suppose I feel the animation's failure as an adaptation comes down to its own popularity dooming it. It got too big too fast that the show was rushed out, leaving its team to take the blame, and the game's own stellar presentation set the bar too high. I can't in good conscience recommend this show to anyone as a replacement for the game. I promise you, just play the game, you'll love it. It's one of my favorite of all time. I am just your average fan, and thanks for taking the time to listen.